Tolkien's ages define the eras of his world. From the early legends of epic proportions to the dwindling magic of its later days. And no doubt, to the surprise of many, these ages span even to our own modern day. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the ages of Middle-earth. As expected, we'll start with the First Age and gradually work our way to the Seventh. That's right, Tolkien referenced a Seventh Age, and when it started. However, we must first note that there were many thousands of years that took place prior to the First Age. From the time the Ainur enter the world of Arda to the awakening of the Elves, over 43,000 years take place. In this span, we see famous events like the first conflicts between the Valar and Morgoth, the destruction of the two lamps, the creation of the two trees, and the creation of the dwarves. Now, if you've watched my videos before, or read or have watched content about Tolkien, you'll no doubt be familiar with how the years of the First Age are commonly counted among fans, with year 1 coinciding with the first rising of the sun. Confession time, this is not actually the first year of the First Age. Tolkien actually says the First Age begins during the 1050th year of the trees, when the elves awake at Lake Cuiviénen. So why the seeming disconnect? Well, taken as a whole, the timing of this First Age is a bit messy, because the years of the trees each equal 9.5 of our own years, whereas the years of the sun are the same as our own. So this means there are actually 4,865 years of this First Age where elves walk the earth. Given the somewhat messy nature of having an age split between years of the trees and normal 365-day years, it's kind of understandable why the shorthand has developed to simply call the latter the First Age. It's a time period where most of the events between elves and Morgoth take place after all. During the first portion of the First Age, which accounts for 4,275 of those total years, we find events like the awakening of the Elves, the defeat and chaining of Melkor by the Valar, Feanor creating the Silmarils, Morgoth's theft of the Silmarils, and the flight of the Noldor from Valinor. The new reckoning of time, called the Years of the Sun, begins as you might expect, with year 1 of what fans traditionally refer to as the First Age. Here we find that first rising of the sun, and the awakening of the first men in the eastern land of Hildorien. And it is within these final 590 years where we see all the epic conflicts of the First Age. The death of Feanor, the battle of Sudden Flame with the dragon Glaurung, the lives and deaths of characters like Fingolfin, Turin Turambar, and Beren and Luthien. And we see the falls of entire kingdoms like Gondolin and Doriath. And finally we see the War of Wrath, the battle where Morgoth is finally defeated and cast into the void. And it is with this conclusion of this greatest of all battles that the First Age concludes. As we'll see, this is a defining trait of Tolkien's ages. They tend to come to a close after a huge, world-altering event, particularly in the eyes of the elves. Thus, the Second Age of the world begins. Here we see the Edain, the great men of the First Age, being gifted the island realm of Númenor. The elves, meanwhile, take up residence in Eriador, both peoples displaced from the complete destruction of Beleriand. In this Second Age, we see the rise of Morgoth's greatest servant and successor, Sauron. He deceives the elves into creating the Rings of Power, then creates his own ruling ring in an attempt to master them. We then see Sauron orchestrate the downfall of Númenor, and the remnants of their people under Elendil found the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor in Middle-earth. Finally, the age concludes with the War of the Last Alliance, a final effort by the Free Peoples to defeat Sauron. With Sauron's defeat and bodily death in 3441, the Second Age comes to an end. We then enter the Third Age, largely defined by the conflicts between the remnants of Sauron's rule and the remnants of Númenor. Many battles and wars are fought between Gondor and the Easterlings and Haradrim in the south. And in the north, Arnor is destroyed by the Witch King's realm of Angmar. And finally, in the waning days of the Third Age, we have the great events depicted in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Bilbo's adventure and Frodo's quest, followed by Sauron's ultimate destruction. But unlike the Second Age, the Third would not immediately end with Sauron's destruction. Instead, it would conclude 2 years later, marking the date when Bilbo, Frodo, Gandalf, Galadriel, and Elrond pass over the sea in the year 3021 of the Third Age, marking the end of the rings and their bearers in Middle-earth. We then move on to the Fourth Age, which includes Aragorn's reign as king and his death. Gimli's founding of a new realm in the Glittering Caves, Legolas establishing a realm of elves in Ithilien, Gimli and Legolas sailing west, the dwarves finally reclaiming Khazad-dûm, and the rule of Aragorn and Arwen's son, Eldarion. This is also the age where Tolkien's abandoned sequel, The New Shadow, would have taken place. We cannot say for certain how long the Fourth Age lasted, though it is said in one of Tolkien's drafts for the appendices, found in the Peoples of Middle-earth, that Eldarion would rule a great realm that would endure for 100 generations of men after him, until a new age brought in again new things. Now, I promised you 7 ages at the beginning, and indeed Tolkien would reference where our world was in his own present day. In 1958, Tolkien would write a letter to Rona Bear, answering a number of questions. He guesses here that the world at this time could be in the Fifth Age, if the ages were to be the same general length as the Second and Third Ages, that is, between 3,000 and 4,000 years. However, he goes on to say that he believes the ages have actually quickened, and instead they may be at the end of the 6th or 7th Age. Tolkien would revisit this topic 2 years later in a text called The Awakening of the Quendi, where he explicitly states that the current year, 1960 AD, is the year 1960 of the 7th Age. In the text, he says this age began with the birth of Jesus Christ, the incarnation of Ilúvatar. And as Carl Hostetter points out in The Fabulous Nature of Middle-earth, Tolkien's thoughts on later ages may have been further rooted in his faith, for the Catholic Church has long had a system of numbered ages of the world, and in the proclamation of the birth of Christ it states, "In the 42nd year of the empire of Octavian Augustus, when the whole world was at peace, in the 6th age of the world, Jesus Christ, eternal God and Son of the eternal Father, desiring to sanctify the world by his most merciful coming, having been conceived of the Holy Ghost, and 9 months having elapsed since his conception, is born in Bethlehem of Judea, having become man of the Virgin Mary." What is perhaps even more surprising is that having the date of 1960 AD, being 1960 of the 7th Age, allows us to figure out when each of the major ages from the books would have taken place. As the incredible Tolkien Gateway points out, in Nature of Middle-earth, Tolkien says there are 16,000 years between the 310th year of the Sun and the year 1960 of the 7th Age. This would result in the following. The end of the First Age, which happens in its 590th year, would equate to 13,760 BC. The end of the Second Age in 3441 would be 10,319 BC. And the end of the Third Age in 3021 would be 7,298 BC. This leaves the remaining 4th through 6th ages, with an average of 2,430 years each, which indeed lines up with Tolkien's earlier comments that the ages had shortened in duration as time went on. And indeed, it seems this calculation was still on Tolkien's mind years later. In 1964, he sat down for an interview with BBC, where he mentions the events of The Lord of the Rings taking place 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Of course, Tolkien also describes events in his writings that have not yet taken place in his chronology. For in the Dagor Dagorath, it is foretold that Morgoth should return to the world, and there be finally and utterly defeated. And what comes next is the second music, where the children of Ilúvatar, along with the Ainur, would sing into creation the new world of Arda. The ages of Middle-earth, and indeed the ages of our own world, is an incredibly fascinating topic. The way Tolkien is able to craft a mythology that feels so incredibly real itself, I think is only helped when considering it as our own ancient history. The big question is, when do we think the 4th and 5th ages ended? What events could have been so monumental as to mark the ending of an age? Perhaps the Great Flood and the later life of Noah? And is the 7th age still our present age? Or will its end be marked with some advance in technology or exploration to the stars? Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. CCDC Red Team, Evil Chameleon, Tom DeBombadil 19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Freya Firestar, Chris and Meg Q, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Kiara Berlin, Z and N, Evely, Kia, Landry Quinn Walker, Ice Glazer, Wizard of Weston, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.